Org Roam is an excellent tool for writing and organizing your thoughts, but when you leverage more of the functions it provides, you can create highly efficient custom workflows for common tasks. In this video, I'm going to show you 5 hacks to optimize your note-taking and project management workflows using the features of Org Roam and Org Mode. Stick around to learn more. So if you enjoy this video, you can support the channel by clicking the like button below and also subscribe if you haven't already. And check out the links below in the description for more ways that you can support the channel if you're so interested. So starting configuration. Before we start with everything in this video, make sure you've got Org Roam set up already. You can get started quickly by copying the configuration below. This is also in the show notes whenever you click that link in the description. But you'll learn more if you watch the previous videos in the Org Roam series first. That's the Build a Second Brave with Org Roam. There's 3 videos before. The links to them here are in the show notes. And then we have the configuration below if you want to copy that. All right, so in this video, I'm going to show you a lot of custom code that I wrote to produce these workflow improvements. If you haven't studied Emacs Lisp yet, some of this code may not be 100% clear, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. I'll try to explain things where I can. All of this code is actually meant to be taken and dropped into your own configuration so that you don't really need to understand how it works so long as it does work. But if you do want to learn how this code works, I'd recommend reading over the code more closely and using the describe function and describe variable commands to read the documentation strings for the functions and variables that I use in the code. You can just basically go through the code and put your cursor on one of the functions or variables and use describe function or describe variable. And then you can also watch my Learning Emacs Lisp series if you want to have a more complete tutorial on Emacs Lisp, and that might actually help you learn how this code works even better. But as always, please feel free to ask any questions in the comments and I'll try to clarify anything that you have, and maybe I can add some more stuff to the show notes later if necessary. All right, the first hack. Sometimes while you're writing, you're going to want to create a new node in your Org Roam notes without interrupting your writing flow. So let's say you're writing a note on a particular topic and you want to insert a new link to something that doesn't actually exist yet in your notes, but you don't want to actually write something about that yet. You just want to insert a link so that later you can go back and fill in that information. Typically, for inserting a link to a node, you would use the Org Roam node insert command. But whenever you create a new node with this command, like you type the name of a node that doesn't exist yet, it's going to open that new note after it gets created, which is a little bit jarring in your workflow because you're trying to write some notes and all of a sudden this new buffer pops up, this new window pops up. So we can actually define a function that enables you to create a new note and insert a link to it without opening this new buffer. And this is going to allow you to quickly create notes for new topics and just be able to write that link in and then go back to it later and fill it in with more information whenever you want to. So I have the code here, but we're going to jump over to a demo configuration that's already got this function loaded up. This is Org Roam node insert immediate. And if you've ever used Org Roam v1, you probably recognize this name because there used to be a function for this, but they took it out to simplify Org Roam v2. But we're going to add it back now. So the idea here is that whenever you are in a note, like let's say the scheme note here, you should be able to run, let's see, Org Roam insert immediate, which I've bound to Control-C in capital I. And then I should be able to insert a link here like Python. Okay, that's fine because that node already exists. But what about if I wanted to insert something like Guile scheme? Now, if I insert that, it just inserts a link to that node directly in this buffer without me actually having to open up the Guile scheme node and then make edits to it or add information to it. But I can always follow that link with Control-C, Control-O, go to that note and fill in information later whenever I'm ready to do that. So that's just a way to optimize your note-taking workflow. Okay. So the way that this is working is basically we're taking the existing Org Roam node insert function that you use, but we're sort of overriding some of the functionality using a let that wraps this. We're basically overriding the Org Roam capture templates variable. We're taking the list of capture templates you already have. We're grabbing the first item off of that. So basically it's usually that default template that's in the first item of your list. If you haven't customized your Org Roam capture templates, and this works right out of the box, no problem. If you have customized your Org Roam capture templates, it's going to pick the first one in that list. So just make sure that whatever the first one is in that list is sort of your default template that doesn't have any extra customization to it. And the important part here is this immediate finish that's being added to that template. We're adding this immediate finish T, which basically tells Org Roam and Org Mode to just create this new note without showing you the capture buffer and just go back to what you were doing before. So very nice little trick here to make your writing workflow more smooth. So now, you can also build your org agenda from your org roam notes for greater productivity whenever you're doing project planning or looking at your to-do list. So one of the most useful features of org mode is the agenda view. And you can actually use your org roam notes as the source for this view. Instead of having to go configure this list of agenda files yourself, you can just pull them automatically from the list of org roam notes that you have. So typically, you're not going to want to pull in all of your org roam notes, because the more org files you have in your agenda view, the slower it is to load. So we want to minimize the number of notes that show up there and really only just pull in the ones that have to-do items. So in this example, we're only going to use the notes with a specific tag like project. And if you remember back to the second episode in the org roam series that I'm making, we made a project capture template that helps you create a new project. And in that template, we set a tag on the file for project, so that it's easier to identify those. That's where this comes into effect, because now we're going to look up all of those notes with project tag. Now I have to type in my SSH key. And then we're going to use those to build our agenda view. So here's a snippet that's going to find all the notes with a specific tag and then set your org agenda list variable with the corresponding note files. Let's jump over to the other screen and I can show you how that looks. I'm going to pull up this EL file. And so far I haven't actually done this yet. So let me pull up the org agenda list variable. Agenda list. Oops, org agenda files, I'm sorry. So right now this is nil. So it has nothing in it. If you pull up the org agenda, nothing will be in there. So we've got this org roam refresh agenda list command that we've defined, which sets the org agenda files to the result of org roam list notes by tag, which is another function we've defined here, where you basically just pass in a tag name, and then it's going to look up the all org roam node files, but it's going to filter out any of them that don't have this tag. And we're using a custom filter function that we've written here, org roam filter by tag. So basically it just returns a filter function that looks for a specific tag. And if you filter out your notes that don't have those tags, you only just get the list back that has that specific tag. So if I run this function now, the my org roam agenda refresh agenda list, we can go check that list of org agenda files. And now we can see that we have a few different files in this list. And if we were to run org agenda using metax, it's going to ask us for which agenda we want. First of all, we can just press A. And now we can see that there is an item here for clean the yard. If we click that link, it actually takes us to the chores note in our org roam notes. And if we go back to the agenda, or actually, let's start it again. Org agenda, and press T this time for the list of all to-do entries. So if you want to see all to-dos across all your project files, press T. So now we've got a couple things here that show tasks in our notes, but we're going to actually do some more things adding tasks to project notes in later parts of this video, so we'll see some more things show up there. So the important thing is just to see that we can pull in our list of org roam files, find all the notes that have a specific tag, and then set that to our agenda list. And this is nice because you don't ever have to think about which project files you have anymore. So long as you set up a project file, make sure it has that project tag, and run this function, it will build that list for you. Let's see, is there anything else interesting here? Oh, yes, okay, a couple things. So first of all, I could not find a reliable, efficient way to pull in daily notes into the agenda view yet. The underlying code in org roam for looking up the daily files is not really made for getting a list of daily files after a particular date. That's something that obviously could be written, and it could be written as part of the org roam package, but it just doesn't exist yet. So if I find out a way to do that later, I may either update these show notes or make another video on it. But I'm sure that somebody would think about, you know, how you get daily files into the agenda, and I don't have a good answer for that yet, but we'll figure it out at some point. And one other thing to mention here, you may have noticed it before whenever I pulled up org agenda and showed the list of to-do entries. Some of the files may not look so nice because they have that timestamp at the beginning, because these project files have a timestamp before the name, at least if that's the way that you've configured your org roam. But we can clean that up easily by adding a category to the file. So if I go to the mesh file, which we saw there, what we need to do is drop down and add a new line called category. And this actually sets a category for the file, but org agenda uses this to display a name. So if I pull that back up again, you can now see that it says mesh and it doesn't say that file name. So the important thing here is that for your project capture template, you're going to want to put that category in also. If you look here where I have an example, what we're doing is in the capture template, we have title and then category, and both of them are both using the same title that you've typed in for the name of that note. So if you do that, then the names of all your notes will show up correctly in the agenda view. It's just something you might want to know if you want to have that view look a little bit clearer and to know exactly which notes are being referred to for all of your org roam tasks. The next hack, selecting from a list of notes with a specific tag. So the org roam node find function, which we have bound to Control-C in F, which is sort of like the main function we use for navigating to specific notes. This function gives us the ability to filter the list of notes that get displayed for selection. And we can define our own function, which shows a selection list for notes that have a specific tag, like the one we've been using before, project. And this can be useful for setting up a key binding to quickly select from a specific set of notes. So if you want to select from any of your project notes, or maybe you want to select from your reference notes, or any other set of notes that you might have a tag set up for, we can make a function to easily get to those notes without any trouble. So one added benefit to this, which is pretty interesting, is that we can actually override the set of capture templates that get used when a new note gets created. So let's say we make a custom function that only finds project notes. If we type in the name of a note that doesn't exist yet, we will try to create a new note from that, or org roam will try to create a new note from that, but we can override the capture templates that get used there to automatically default to a specific project template note so that you automatically get a new project note if you type in something that doesn't exist yet, which is great. So let's go and try this code. I'll explain more about what it does whenever we get over there. So let's go back to roam.el. And I think I've bound this to, let's see, what was it bound to? I think it was Control-C in P, right. Okay, so that's for my org roam find project. So I'm gonna use Control-C in P, and now it's gonna ask me for which project I want to open. And we can see that these are just the 3 notes that I have that are project notes. So how about I type in the, I can just select system characters if I wanted to. But if I use Control-C in P again to look for projects, I can type in YouTube. And then it's automatically going to create a new capture buffer for this project with the project template that I specified. And I can type in whatever I want here, and just press Control-C, Control-C. And now I have a new project for the name that I typed in, YouTube in this case. And also, since I put the category and the file tags inside of this, this file will be set up to show up in my agenda as well. But if we look at the code, let's just kind of try to understand what's going on here. So let's skip the hook thing for a second. I'll tell you what that means in just a second. So the most important thing is that we're using the org roam node find command, like I mentioned before. We skipped the first 2 parameters because they're not necessary for this exercise, but we do pass in the output of our org roam filter by tag function that we mentioned before. We're going to try to filter that list by the project tag. And then we have this template section right at the end here where we say we are overriding the set of capture templates for this org roam node find execution to only have a project template. And since we only put one template here, this is the one that gets chosen by default. So we don't get prompted for which template gets picked in this case. It just goes straight to this project template. And basically just makes it so that whenever you type in the name of a project that doesn't exist, it will create a brand new one, which is awesome. Now, one special thing we're doing in this case is we're adding a hook to the org capture after finalize hook for this function we've defined called org roam project finalize hook. And what this does is it actually adds this file automatically to the set of agenda files. So you don't have to go back and refresh that list of agenda files anymore. If you create a new project with this approach, it will automatically add it to your agenda files. And if we go look at org agenda right now, look at the list of to-dos, we'll see that this to-do that's already in the YouTube note that was part of the capture template is already showing up. So already we have this new project showing up in our org agenda, which is pretty cool. A couple other things to mention here is that we will remove ourselves from the hook right after this function gets called, just so that we don't have it sitting around forever. And also we check to make sure that the note that you're capturing has not been aborted, so that we don't add this file to the agenda if we actually cancel the capture for this new note. So I'm not going to go too much into detail there, but you can look at the documentation for org note abort, etc., to look into more about how that works. The important thing here is that we have an easy way to select from projects and create a new project if necessary, if that project does not already exist. So the next hack is Streamlined custom capture for tasks and notes. So org roam provides a low-level function called org roam capture with a hyphen at the end. That's actually intentional. I'm not sure exactly why it was named like that, but that's the way it's named. And this allows you to invoke org roam's note capture functionality in a very flexible way. You have total control over what happens with it. You can learn more about that in the org roam manual under the section extending the capture system. So we can actually use this function to optimize specific parts of our capture workflow. There's a couple ways here that I'm going to show you how you might be able to use it. The first one is if you want to keep an inbox of notes and tasks. So for instance, if you want to quickly capture new notes and tasks with a single key binding in a place that you can review later, like an inbox, you can use this function to capture to a specific file. And even though this file won't have the timestamp file name in front of it, won't have those numbers in the front, it's still going to be treated as a node in your org roam notes. So you can use Control-C and F to find the inbox file that we're creating with this capture template. So what we're going to do is define a function called org roam capture inbox, which you can see right here. And this function is going to call org roam capture with a hyphen at the end. And for the node section, we're just going to call org roam node create, which doesn't really do anything, just creates a blank node. And then for the templates list, which is the important part here, we have a single template called inbox, and it purely just creates a heading as the content. And then the file name is inbox.org and the title is inbox. And this only gets invoked, or this inbox.org part only gets invoked if inbox doesn't exist already. So if you don't have an inbox.org file, this will create it. If you do have one, it's just going to add this new captured item directly into that inbox file. So this makes it really quick to do that. Let's see, what was the other part of that? And we're binding this to Control-C in B. So let's see what happens when I press Control-C in B. When I do that, it pulls up a capture buffer. It has just a single star for this heading. Here's a note that I want to remember. I press Control-C, and then it goes away completely. So this is like a fire and forget type of capture template where you can create a new note. Like let's say you're working on a project and you want to remember something. You don't want to think about where you put it. You just want to drop it somewhere so that you have it for later. You can make a capture directly into your inbox. And then if you use Control-C in F and look for your inbox file, you can go back and you can find that note that got captured. You can also set to-do items here, anything you want to do. Now, obviously, if you're using org roam, there's probably more efficient ways to quickly capture things into notes that you care about. But if you like to have an inbox, if this is part of your workflow, then this is a very easy way to set one of those up for your future use. The next thing, which I find to be a lot more interesting, is to capture a task directly into a specific project. So if you set up a project, project note files that we've been talking about earlier in this video, you can set up a capture template that allows you to quickly capture tasks for any project that exists or maybe doesn't exist yet. So much like before, we can either select a project that exists or doesn't exist, and if it doesn't exist, it will be created before that task gets captured into it. So it's super powerful. Like if you have a new project that you need to work on, and you don't have a note for it yet, you can run this capture template to make a task for it, and it will create the project note first and then add the task into it, which is really cool, really fast. So we got the code here. I'm going to jump over to this file again, capture task. There it is right there. So let's run it first. I think I've got this bound to Control-C in T. And we see our list of projects here. The YouTube project is there that we created before. Let's see, how about I create a new project called videos. And now we got a capture buffer that has a to-do started for us already. I could say record the next video. And one thing you might not know about these capture templates is you can keep adding tasks if you want to. So if I press Alt-Enter here, or actually Control-Alt-Enter, I could put another task in. So if you want to capture multiple tasks for a project, you can easily do that. Let's see, plan the other video, let's say. So now I've got these things ready to be captured into the file. If I press Control-C, the capture template view goes away. We've stored those tasks. We can go back to whatever we were doing. And then if we want to go look at that file, Control-C in F, and I go to videos, we can see that there's a task entry, and then we have the to-dos that we have captured in here. I noticed one mistake I made is that I should have put 2 heading levels in, but the fact that we got it into the file that didn't exist already and has now been created is great. We also automatically added this tasks section in, and that comes from the the capture template. So if we look at the org roam capture task function, we're using org roam capture hyphen as before. And then if we go to the template section, we can take a look at the input here, which is to do, and I should actually fix that to be a second level heading. And then one thing we're using that's different here than from previous capture templates we've seen before is instead of using file plus head, we're using file plus head plus OLP. And what that means is this, well, I guess you could call it a function, but it's not really a function, has, instead of 2 parameters, it has 3 parameters now. And the third parameter is the heading under which this new item gets captured. So in this case, we're saying tasks, which is a top level heading. But even if you wanted to do like some, like maybe second or third level heading, you could say project tasks. And this is like the hierarchy of where you're inserting things. But for our purposes, we're inserting it under a heading called tasks. And in that file, if that heading does not exist yet, the capture template will create it. So it's automated a lot of the process for us for actually creating a new note file, creating a task that goes into that note file, and then putting it under the right heading. Now, if we run this again, Control-C-N-T, I can pick videos again, and then I can say, let me make this another, whoops, let me make this another second level heading. To do, let's see, delete the channel. How about that? Control-C, and that actually goes into that videos note, which I can pull back, whoops, I can pull back up with Control-C-N-F, videos. And then we do have this new delete channel that showed up. I think that the template is broken right now, but a delete channel does get added where it's supposed to be, which is awesome. So if the note already exists, it just gets dropped into the existing note. But if it doesn't exist yet, it will create it first and then put that captured task into the note, which is really, really cool. All right, so I think that's everything we wanted to say there. Oh, and the same thing applies here. We have that hook for org capture after finalize hook, which puts the file in the agenda after it's been created, if it is in fact a new file, which is great. And the last hack for this video is that there's one interesting use for daily files that we haven't really thought about yet, which is to keep a log of tasks that were completed on a particular day. So what if we could automatically copy completed tasks in any org mode file to today's daily file? So it could be org files that aren't even part of your org roam notes, but we can copy those over to your daily file. So maybe you want to keep it as like a log of things that happened. Now, someone could say, oh, well, you could just use your org agenda for that, which is true. But this is, if you treat your daily file as more like a history for what happened on a particular day, then that file doesn't need to be generated. It's just something that already exists. So copying those completed tasks over to it could be kind of nice. So we can actually accomplish this by adding some custom code. And this following snippet sets up a hook for all org mode task state changes. So changing from to do to done or to any other state, and then copies any completed tasks, ones that have been changed to done, to today's daily note file. And this is a little bit more complicated than the previous example, so I'll try to step through it a little bit whenever we when we see how it works. So all I really need to do is just jump into a file. So let's say Control-C-N-F scheme, and I have a to-do here for learn scheme. So if I just use Shift right and set this to done, then I can go to my daily note file. So Control-C-N-D-D, and we see that learn scheme is here now. So we actually copied this task over to the daily file to have a list of tasks that show that we finished this task today. So if you ever go back to this daily note, you'll see that you learned scheme on September 13th, which is kind of nice. Also, any other tasks. So let's see, maybe if I go to a file that, I'll turn this to to-do, that is not part of my org roam notes. This is just a file called test.org. It's in my home folder. If I change this to done, well, let's go first to, whoops, let's go first back to the daily file for today. That task is not here right now, okay? So I'm gonna switch back to test.org. I'm gonna use Shift left arrow to complete it. Then I'm gonna jump back to my daily file and see now that this is a test has now been moved here. And the interesting thing is that it actually gets put in the right heading level. This is 2 stars here, but the original file was actually a 1-star heading level. So we're using a command called org refile to take care of this for us. And it's smart and it kind of understands context in org files and can move tasks or copy tasks in a very clean way with all the necessary metadata and contents as well. So let's take a look at the code really quickly and see if we can understand how it works. So first of all, we are adding a function to the org after to-do state change hook. This is a hook that gets run whenever a to-do state changes. And in that, we're going to check first whether the state of the current task is done. So whenever this hook runs, this org state variable will be set to whatever the state of that task is. And then if it's done, we are going to run this my org roam copy to do to today function, which is defined right here. So in this function, what happens is that we set a few variables to override some functionality. And this is where things get a little bit more complicated. So we're overriding org roam dailies capture templates. We're actually going to create an inline template here for capturing tasks to today's date. So this is a daily file. We can see that we have the format for the daily for today's date, and the title also is the same. And we're using this file plus head plus OLP that I mentioned before to put it under the tasks heading. So the next thing we're going to do is set a hook for saving the buffer after we do a refile, just to make sure that that buffer doesn't end up in a modified state. And maybe, Emacs crashes or your computer crashes and you lose that information. You definitely want to make sure that gets saved. And we also create a couple other variables. We also set org refile keep to true. And what this does is it copies that task from the original location to the destination location. It doesn't actually copy it. It just tells org refile to copy it. If you set that to nil instead, it will move the task if you want to move them instead. All right, so the next thing we do after we set up these variables is we call save window excursion. And that basically just tells Emacs, okay, inside of this call to save window excursion, I'm going to do some things, but once this is finished, I want you to set all the window state back to what it was before so that the user doesn't even realize something happened. Because otherwise, these functions we're calling are actually going to change the window state and it will annoy the user. So inside of this function, we're going to call org roam dailies capture, which invokes a daily capture with this template that we actually overrided for the dailies capture templates. And then what it's doing here is this second parameter actually says, instead of creating something with that capture template, just jump to the location in that buffer. And what we're going to do now is grab the buffer file name. Since we can't actually know in advance what the buffer file name is going to be because the capture system has to create it, now since we are in that file after running capture, we can run buffer file name to get the file name and also get the location in the file. And then we exit out of that, but before that we set these two variables with that information. And now we can use that information to then refile the task at the current location in the original buffer we were in to that location in the new captured entry. So this is a little bit complicated. I know that my explanation is probably not going to clarify it for everybody. So take a closer look at this code if you want to understand how it works. But as you can see, it works automatically. As soon as I change the state of a to-do item, it gets copied over. You didn't have to do anything. Everything gets saved on its own, and you have that information logged forever. So very cool little trick there. It took me a little bit of time to get the right stuff dialed in to make this work, but I'm kind of happy with how it turned out. So pretty cool. All right, so I've got a little bit more detail here about how it works. Probably it's the same things as I just said, but you can take a look at that and read it if you want to. Okay, so final configuration. After we've shown you the 5 hacks here, you can take this block of code at the end and just copy it and paste it into your configuration if you want to try all of it out. But there's one extremely important note here, which is that whatever file you put this code in, if it's your init.el or some other elisp file, you need to make sure that the first line of the file has this lexical binding T variable set in it. This is very important because there is a function in here, filter by tag, which uses lexical scoping. It depends on lexical scoping to be turned on. And if you don't know what lexical scoping is, we're not going to get into that right now, but it's just about how variables get kept into these functions that get returned by a function. So we're returning a filter function from this function. I can make another video about it sometime. Point being, this function requires that. So wherever you copy this code, make sure you have that line at the top of the file, then everything should work just fine. If you have any questions about that, definitely leave a note in the comments or come find me on Discord or IRC and I'll be happy to explain it to you. All right, so that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this foray into some more advanced hacks on using org roam and org mode. If you liked the video, like I said, please leave a like and leave a comment if you have any questions, or just let me know if you liked it. And until next time, thanks so much for watching and happy hacking. We'll see ya.